record. Fantastic. All right, so I guess I'll start over because this is a long one. This is a biggie. This is an old one but good one. I'm kidding. I don't mean to joke about this because it's serious through and through. Most serious thing I've ever said in my life, and possibly ever will be. But when we're talking about possibilities, so if you know that all things that exist have an opposite, yeah, plus, minus, up, down, left, right, this, that, everything or nothing, then you know that in the Bible, this is the easiest way to explain it. I'm going to reference the Bible because number one book sold, I feel like it'll reach more people and then it can be explained thereafter. So, in the Bible it says, all things are created equal. I believe that could be, actually, that's mathematical. So everything is comprised to have an equal and opposite reaction, or a counterpart, if you will, or however else you want to explain it. I'm not on the tangent. So we have the fact that you have day and night, 12 and 12, you got 24 hours. The way that the brain works and the way that you actually deposit memories into your memory bank is whatever stays in your short term and goes to your long term, and then is most important as to stay there because of the actual mental processes in the brain don't like to be bogged down by shit that doesn't matter. Actually, yes, it would be shit that doesn't matter at that point, because if your brain doesn't care to remember it, then it's shit to you, and so that word is actually properly used. So, when you think of the fact that everything has an opposite, that's the way that the entire universe is made. The entire cosmos, the entire existence of existence, right? Okay. Then we know that if you have night and day that are 12 and 12, and this is the day that the Lord hath made, or really God hath made, because you shouldn't call God Lord, you should call God God, because God's anything God's God. So, and God to God, anything God's to God. So, the only thing that's ever going to be able to explain God is the idea of something that you are unable to actually understand. So really, any name that you give God, which indicates that what you are speaking of is incomprehensible to the mind. Like, make up a word, spell a bunch of letters, say it out loud, and then think about how those letters mean so many words or in parts of so many words, and then use that for the day as the name of God. Because that would give you more of the imaginative power that it takes within the brain to understand what God actually is, what God sees, what God is. Because such as quantum state exists within supercomputers, we know for a fact that if you change one particle state within a supercomputer, it will have an effect on the next particle. Now, God is such as time, or this actually related to, I was having this conversation earlier and then realized I'm out here alone, so I need to be recording this because this is actually important for once, and so I'm glad I haven't reported everything else I've said up until this point like this, because this pertains to everything that's happening. So, when you have a supercomputer, the particles are essentially in both states simultaneously until a decision is made on one, causing the other, or causing the next string of particles to be affected. God being such a time shows, actually let me give you the forefront of that. If you're not living the full 24 hours, to solidify this idea that I have, that I'll still open. To solidify the ideas that are within the brain, you have to go to sleep, essentially. And when you wake, those things that are most important to you stay. If this is the day that the Lord hath made, 24 hours therein, and you're going to sleep for 8 hours, you should be awake for 36 hours. So that way, or at least 36 hours. So that way, only that which is important stays in your long-term memory and doesn't get weeded out. Because if you stay up for 48 hours, which would, let's make it an even 50-50. So you stay up for 42 hours. You sleep for 8. You got 50 hours right there. Right. Okay. So what happens is, things that get processed from your short-term memory to your long-term memory are going to be done. Or they're going to exist, right? So whenever your long-term memory bank starts to get more full, other long-term memories that are more important will take precedence, or not precedence, will be more important to a person. And so they will be the replacement that replaces that thing in your long-term memory that leaves you with more of what you believe and what you hold true than just everything that can happen in a 24-hour period where you stay awake for 16 hours and then you go to sleep for 8. And then you end up with 24 hours and you never experience the full totality of, as it says in the Bible, this is the day the Lord hath made, or this is the day that God hath made. So then if you're not staying awake for a full 24 hours and then going to bed at 36 hours, wait, 24, 8, 32 hours, sorry. So if you're not staying awake for if you're not staying awake for 24 hours and sleeping 8, you're not experiencing the full day that the Lord hath made, okay, or God hath made, or that is made. Let's just say that. So, I don't want to lose too many people with the name or frame of reference and things like that, because the idea is there, and yet the idea is. So, if everything is created with an opposite, if everything that has been created has an opposite and balances out this equation, it is sensible to give yourself a chance to process all of that information at once. Whenever you sleep after staying awake for 24 hours and then sleeping 8. Because if you're not getting the truth, the full truth, and nothing but the truth within the day that you experience, then you don't give your brain time enough to process what happens throughout the day. Okay? Speaking of time, that idea got solidified, so then we'll go back to the, not tangent, but path I was on. I skipped ahead. So, I'm going to use actually, okay, so I'm going to make up a word real quick. I don't have a pencil, but I do have pound of dirt I can write on. Okay, so I'm going to write just some letters, so then that way, I don't, because if anything ever created anything and you believe in something that created everything, then whatever you call it should change daily, so that way you can never actually know what you're going to be saying, because you're going to write a word that's just a jumble of letters that are parts of other words and are parts of many words. So not only the single letter indication of the letter A, as it is in after, thereafter, station, or stamp, or studiography and that would be the okay, so studia kalaya, okay, so that's about as much as I understand about that word, because I'm trying to perceive literally within my brain something I cannot perceive, such as the word I just said that I made up, that its existence is of many words and word groups together that cause my brain to start to arch over to ideas, but it's never solidified. So when you think of God in such a manner as to change the name that you call God every day by a jumble of letters that you couldn't say twice, because it is so long, so perplexed, and could be so many different parts of what words, because it could be Ilion at the end, or Tion, which is shun. So then if you have Constitution, you have everything with that on the end of it. Every word with that on the end of it is part of it. So when you think about the word that you make, statiographiation, that's what it's going to be. Statiographiation. Where am I getting the parts of those words, and from what words am I getting them from? All of them that they exist with. And so because I feel as though stationaliography elation, because stationaliography affiliation, that works. Stationaliography affiliationatory is essentially trying to give a name to God that's different every day. That you can't actually understand the word you're saying because it is and can be parts of so many words. So if I'm saying I am a chameleon dactyl, then you could start to understand what I mean because I'm using it more in a way that, so it has chameleon, it has illion, so that's like million, and then you also have a rarity, which is rarity in and of itself, but then chameleonary rarity, could it also mean some other things? Yes, I really don't know. I'm trying to like grasp her thoughts here. But then you have at the very end, it's, and I forgot, see, and that's how God should be. You can, so let's say an entity in which created everything cannot be perceived or just you see and you know. It has to be a constant struggle to try to understand more about it. And so the way that we communicate and the way that our brain can process information is via language. And whether it's body language or spoken language or sign language or any language that is portrayed, the more complex the word and the more mixtures of different words that it has in it, and the fact that your brain doesn't already have those neural pathways reinforced, you can miss information. If you're ever trying to think about an entity that has created everything, how could that entity be so much all at one time? So then, back to time. I know I was going with an idea there. I'll get back to it. I'll come back to it. Okay. So, God being time, such as matter within a supercomputer exists, or such as Schrodinger's cat, who is and is not dead inside the box, and you don't know till you look, is exactly how supercomputers work. If you have a string of particles and you change one in any direction, the others will be affected because they are connected, because they are set up in superstrings or substrings or supersets, and so it gets really complex, and I don't want to convolute it. So what happens is if you change, so this is actually the idea I wanted to originally make. If you are something that created everything, you would know all things but know nothing until something happened. But you would also know anything and everything that is possible, so you would never be surprised, such as if you know for a fact that you need an equation to balance out, and I have 1 plus 2 on one side and 4 plus 2 on the other side. What can I do? Actually, no, I have 4 on one side and 2 on the other side. 4 equals 2. How do I make that true? Well, you could do 2 plus 2, or you could say 4 minus 2, or negative 2 plus 4 is 2. There are so many different ways, but each different way in and of itself is a way in which there could be a particle, a super state change, such as a supercomputer, in which it affects the string of things that come next. Because what if that is just one small part of a giant equation, such as all things being created equal or to equal out? So from there, I understand that, or as the idea is portrayed, for things I believe, things I'm not sure of, because the only thing I'm sure of is that, see, I don't have enough words currently ready in my mind, so let me do this. So I know that, and I'm trying to say, I know that God exists, but I'm going to do it like this. I know that Levaria irifoma ipa eichel edel unkavad tree exists. And that's just because of the things that are around me, but I'm taking small parts from those words to try to make a bigger, grander idea so I can try to grasp more of the view of what it is that I'm looking for. I'm looking for truth. I don't care what the equation looks like, I'm looking for the answer. As a physicist, I'm sure you know what that's like. You don't care what the equation looks like, you just need one, right? Okay, so, and then you can balance it out from there. And how you do so actually matters. So whenever you say, okay, so we're gonna do, because if you go the easy route and you're like, oh, well, I'll just divide everything by 2, but then you make everything a fraction, it makes everything difficult. However, if you square everything and then divide it by 2, you may find that some things are a little bit easier to contemplate. And the amount in the numbers doesn't actually matter. What does matter is, so speaking of matter, so yes, so therein, so got me time. So I also want to just add some side notes here. Kind of started me on this whole thing. If everything we currently see, if we take a picture of it as it actually exists without color modification, it shows up black and white, negative. We are able to see colors. The portrayance of the vision of heaven is said to have 12 layers. But if you've ever seen a Pink Floyd album, so does color. And I believe the Jules reference there were known to be so long lasting that if the names were used, the colors therein would also be present. Shades of colors. Okay, so whenever the reference of heaven is made, the jewels that are referenced are not for the layers, but they could be for the layers of light that are exuding from the throne or what have you that's in the center. So, why do angels have so many eyes? Because there are so many different color changes that are possible that in heaven, they would need to see them to be able to see the full spectrum of what it is that God made. Because if you look at a person, they don't show all the light that they are, they only show the light that's reflected. So in heaven, it would be quite the opposite. You would be every color that you absorb and not the one that you are, that you look here in this current state. So that's why angels would have so many eyes, because they would need to be able to see all the different color hues and shades. And because if you think about it, if you go from red to orange and then you find that fine line in the middle and then you zoom in as far as a microscope at 1,000 times, you find out that there are still all the way down to the very particle of yellow and red that actually make that color. So if you work on computers, you know that every little number you change, every little bit of color you give it does actually change it. Whether or not we can perceive it, you know, is up for debate or whatever, but I'm really just saying, well, that's the side note. So, because this is gonna, I don't want to say this, but I'm gonna say this because I'm looking for the truth. And so if I come to these conclusions or whatever, and that's irrelevant, I don't really care. So all I know is that Lever Rasai, I don't really believe the grass is sky, but to say it in such a way that it relates to other words as well, and so that way, you know, I know that exists. I know God exists. I know. It's so weird. You know, it's like you could imagine God as the existence of, as soon as you open your mouth, what comes out? That, right there, that is the question. That is the question. So it's like, that's that gives a better that gives you a better opportunity to actually perceive what it is that I feel as though God is, because as soon as you open your mouth, what comes out? That's the question. What comes out? That's how vast of a word I'm talking about that I would need to explain, at least in a small part, that I would feel would be worthy of me even trying to explain what it is that I feel the entity that is the creation of all things. So yeah, and so I really want to cut to the chase. So I'm gonna I'm a little pressed for time. So yeah. So just as a side note, this is what I was gonna say, or this is some truth that I found. So Jesus was the type of person to answer questions with questions, and it was confusing. But I noticed there was a pattern of that type of behavior within the Bible whenever he was asked things, or he would state things in a question-like manner. And so I've concluded thus far, that being, that kind of threw me off. So, okay. So, I forgot what I was saying. Yes. Always saying things in a question-like manner, so that way you can show clearly the types of thoughts that come together for you to come to the conclusion. So if you say, what the hell are you doing? I would say, or I guess in a smart-ass way, it's like, if you're outside, what are you doing? So then but that's not really the way Jesus had done it in the Bible. Jesus done it more in a way to give explanation to things. So if Jesus, okay, good. So if Jesus was asked, do you cast out demons in the name of the devil? And so instead of saying no or yes, he says, okay, so actually as a precursor to this, if angels are the firstborn of God, would that make angels the firstborn children of God? Possibly, yes. Who would know more about God and would be angelic in such a way to understand how God views things, to be able to come back in the spirit as Jesus did and know all the things that Jesus did? Well, it would have probably had to have been an angel or God, or both, because angels are more like God than we'll ever be. So if it was more like a man, I don't think Jesus would have been able to do the things that he had done. Furthermore, if he's asked, do you cast out demons in the name of the devil? And he says, would I be against my own house, or would a master be against his own house, casting out whatever in his own name? And so it kind of dawned on me that that's a really strange way to say yes or no. And so it gets me back to the precursor. If angels are the firstborn of God, most like God, most knowing of God, most knowing of the ways of God, and there is one who is actually kind of like higher up there in the hierarchy, wouldn't that mean that there is a definite possibility? Wouldn't that mean that there's a definite possibility that the devil had already went through repentance and was on his way back home to see God, and then people killed him, or we killed him because we are people. So we as people ended up killing Jesus, which could have very well been the spirit of the... Is that a macaw? Oh, no. Oh my God, that is so cool. Yeah, I'm good. I'm actually recording something right now that I'm going to post later on YouTube about kind of some ideas about like God and things like that kind of made sense. Like they say angels have so many eyes. Why? Well, because you know how we see things in negative, but they look like color to us? Well, then if you think about it, angels need so many eyes to see the actual color, because it wouldn't be like it is here. They would be exuding light and not absorbing it and only reflecting one shade. So they would need so many eyes to see how God actually made things. And so, you know, and then bits like that, and it goes on and upward and stuff. So, yeah. You should check it out. It's going to be under, I think it's going to be John Portillo or Tony M203 Montana. because Intel 3 is grenade launcher, so it's like Tony Grenade Launcher Montana. Yeah. But yeah, I guess you'll be on the recording now. Is that okay with you? Awesome, fantastic. Thanks for checking. I like your macaw.
Thank you.
I like your macaw. You're awesome. See ya. Get down, buddy. You too. See ya. So being most like God, you got the angels and things, and so okay. So just as a clarification and a disclaimer, this is not some type of satanic worship type speech or something like that. This is actually literally, quite literally, trying to gain more truth, because I feel as though if a person has ever lied, it makes them a liar. So then you know if any man and every man has ever lied, because they have, unless they're child size or whatever, then all men are liars, because that's how a Christian explained it to me, and it kind of made sense. Have you ever lied? Have you ever stole? Have you ever cheated? Then you're a cheating, lying thief. And that shit struck me in a weird way. So when you think about it, the chances of actual truth being in the Bible are slim to just enough that if you read through it, you can start to decipher, or as an equation, balance it out to where you get rid of the things that don't really hold substance of the message till you can get to the message. So like a physicist, you're trying to balance an equation, but you know, that was about 10 minutes ago or 5 minutes ago we were talking about that, so but that was a whole 5-minute idea. So let's go past that and go to, all right, so could that be possible? Yes, very possible. And that's not something I would have thought that they would have put in the Bible. Look at that nail. Because everybody says, thank you, God, damn the devil. Okay, so the crazy thing is, God knows everything. God allowed the devil in the garden because God knows everything. You have to understand. Or at least that would make it easier to understand. So then you have here. You have God that made everything, knows everything. You have a devil in a garden that God hath made, the garden and the devil, and allowed that to happen so that way we could be finally able to understand more about God. I don't know, as it said in the Bible, mysteries being revealed and things like that or whatever, and it's like over time, only in time, through time, can things be revealed because of how, and I'm not even going to question, but this leads me back to an idea about 10 minutes ago. So when you think about the fact that God makes everything, so it's kind of like Schrodinger's cat. That's what I was getting at. It's kind of like Schrodinger's cat. So when God looks upon God's creation, I believe that if, just like a supercomputer, if you were to change one particle in any direction, it would cause the string of particles to be affected. And in a way, I guess that is actually what string theory is. So you have that, but you also have Schrodinger's cat, where everything can and can't be if we don't know it. Now, the perception of a person is definitely a point in time. God would be all of time, all things, at all variations of all things in any manner that it can be or cannot be at all times, and would know all of that at the whole time. So God would never be surprised at whatever it is that happens. So essentially, even if you did know everything, you wouldn't know anything until, well, who are you observing? So if you're observing people, then you would be waiting for them to say what their perception is, so then you could show or know what their perception is. Because when you add free will into it, it's kind of like God has to wait on us. And sometimes we feel like we're waiting on God, but it's really the other way around, because if in the Bible it says that through time you're supposed to learn more about God and then all this other stuff, you know, you know, I don't want to quote scripture because I don't know. The only thing I know is there's enough information and truth in the world that exists that you could start to have an idea and understanding of how to balance out an equation. So if you're ever looking for truth or just what is life, so if you're looking for the answer to the question, what is life, and you're the one who poses the question, you know what you're trying to get it to equate to after all the math is done, so you have a better chance of being able to do so. Okay, so yeah, so that solidifies the idea earlier about Schrodinger's cat and you know, states of matter, supercomputers, string theory, and you know, this and that, the other, up, down, left, right, everything or none thing. So feel as though I've left something out. Oh, okay, yeah. So when Jesus is asked, do you cast out demons in the name of the devil? And he doesn't say yes or no. It's kind of strange that he does that. But I just, was thinking, well, hey, let's make note of that because that's weird. And then so getting down to it, it's kind of like, well, okay, so we know it is a life truth that when they say, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, we understand that to be true. So if you know for a fact that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and the fact that the spirit of the devil being the firstborn of God went to hell and was cast out of the sight of God, and then you have someone who is most like God trying to return to God, home, as it said in the Bible. That could have very well been the same spirit, because it is said that there is supposed to be a returning of, or actually I'm not really sure how it's said, but my belief is, because I don't like to get into all the ways that biblical text can be interpreted or recited or whatever, but if you were ever made by God and you knew and saw God before, would you want to go home eventually? How long would that take? God only knows. However, if hell is paved with good intentions, if the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and you have what everybody calls the ruler of hell, this whole thank you God damn the devil thing, which is kind of weird, because if God is all things, why are you taking credit away from God? If God is jealous, why would you blame the devil like you're putting God and the devil at the same mark? So I'm not gonna name call, so I'm not gonna say that. But if you are holding God and the devil up at the same eye level, like standard, like you're holding the scales of justice and you tell yourself what is just, and then you say, thanks be to God, damn the devil for everything that's bad, is what I was getting at. I guess I should have said that last part. Sometimes I infer things. Okay, so if you're holding the scale and you're like, thanks be to God and damn the devil for everything that's bad, you're basically saying that the devil is the one that makes everything bad, so God had nothing to do with it. So then you're taking credit away from God, who is jealous, for the creation of good and bad things. So if God created everything and you believe that, but then you give credit to the devil for bad things, then you're actually exalting the devil higher over the station, even in the Bible that it says the devil was made, because God is above all things and is held as to have no equal. So to say, damn the devil for everything that's bad, you're telling me that God has nothing to say about that? That God can't do anything about that? That the devil has enough power to overpower God to make bad things happen? Or is it just God? Because in the grand scheme of things, when you think about how much time actually exists, and then our existence being so short, and then the types of things that God would need to do, scientifically, spiritually, and over time for things to happen, kind of like everything has to have a paper trail. If you have a supercomputer, or you study a little bit of string theory, you realize if you change one state of matter in its superposition and actually give it a yes or no, then it will change everything in that substring or set, such as the butterfly effect. If you have a butterfly that flaps its wings, barely, could it cause a hurricane? That's the idea. It's more of a philosophy in that sense, but could it? Yes, I guess it could, because you don't know how that flap of a wing could have went through a fan, could have went through a bigger fan, could have been carried across the ocean at just the right time with the perfect wave to roll around. And then you have the difference in the air temperatures, which causes it to just start to swirl. But if it would have been a half of a second later or sooner, it wouldn't have caught that wave just perfect. It wouldn't have went through that fan where the blade would have just barely missed it. It would have went through the blade and got chopped in half, and so part of it would have been stopped by the friction that's caused whenever the air would have hit the back of the blade. But that exact flap and change in the super states of matter could indeed, and does indeed, show that the flap of a butterfly's wings could indeed cause a hurricane, because unless you can mathematically prove that you can't, or it won't, or it don't, then it's a hypothesis. There you go. This is all a hypothesis, because I'm still trying to work it out. But I do know one thing: God exists. can't remember. I still feel like I left something out. I started on a tangent before I said that. What was it? Super States, Schrodinger's cat. Then I started to talk about, oh yeah, so if you had the spirit of the first man, okay, so I'm not even going to give a name. I'm just going to tell you something. Okay, so this is something that's not actually in the Bible, so I don't know very much about it. If you have the first thing that was made by God and has seen God personally, but then God pushed away, and that thing is away from God, the thing that has made everything, don't you think it would want to be back in the presence of God? And so eventually would, if it had to, I guess I can use the word repent to get back to God. And then if man were the ones to kill it, don't you think hell hath no fury like a woman scorned? Kind of like there's nothing in hell that could be worse than God being mad about you killing its firstborn. Think about that. You kill God's firstborn when he's on the way home and hasn't seen God in forever. Imagine that. Since the beginning of time, the devil, or I'm sorry, I wasn't supposed to use names, but if you have the spirit of the firstborn angel headed home, and God knows this and sees it, and then he's put on a cross and given as a joke a crown of thorns, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. So, yeah. Imagine that from a mother's perspective, but then you have the power of God. Would you give him a second chance? The devil got one, we got one. If you don't take this one, you might not have none.